Congresswoman Marjorie Taylor Greene is at it again, comparing President Biden's effort to vaccinate more Americans to the Nazis, weeks after she supposedly apologized for comparing COVID restrictions to the Nazis. Now, here's how we got here. With COVID cases up now in 27 states, the Biden administration is launching a new door-to-door campaign to try and get more Americans vaccinated. Congresswoman Taylor attacked the program on Twitter, writing, and I quote, "Biden pushing a vaccine that is not FDA approved shows COVID is a political tool used to control people. People have a choice. They don't need your medical brown shirts showing up at their door ordering vaccinations. You can't force people to be part of the human experiment," end quote. Now, keeping them honest, the brown shirts, also called stormtroopers, were a paramilitary group that played a big role in the rise of Hitler and the Nazi Party in the 1930s as well as the 40s, which of course was then led to the Holocaust and the genocide of 6 million Jews and others. Greene's tweet comes weeks after she said this about mask-wearing rules at the Capitol.
You know, we can look back in a time in history where people were told to wear a gold star, and they were definitely treated like second-class citizens, so much so that they were put in trains and taken to gas chambers in Nazi Germany. And this is exactly the type of abuse that Nancy Pelosi is talking about.
Greene came under fire for that from both sides of the aisle, actually. She even got a rare reprimand from GOP House Leader Kevin McCarthy. So later, she decided to take in a bit of history and toured the U.S. Holocaust Museum. And afterward, she seemed to have learned a lesson. Here's what she told reporters.
There is no comparison to the Holocaust. And there are words that I have said and remarks that I've made that I know are offensive. And for that, I want to apologize.
There is no comparison to the Holocaust, she said there. So much for that today. Asked about it today, White House Press Secretary Jen Psaki said, quote, "We don't take any of our health and medical advice from Marjorie Taylor Greene. I can assure everyone of that," unquote.
Abby Phillip is anchor of Inside Politics Sunday, and Bill Kristol is editor-at-large of The Bulwark. Bill, a trip to the Holocaust Museum, then an apology, now doing it again. I struggle to understand why this could possibly continue happening. One doesn't just come up with a reference to brown shirts.
I mean, she believes that the current American government is a dictatorship, but full of people who have ill will towards their fellow Americans. I take it she believes that people who work for the CDC or public health organizations at the state level who might try to get people to take the vaccine are morally equivalent to people in the Nazi regime. She seems to think that the Biden administration is somewhat like it's a dictatorial administration. So for me, it's not just about the inappropriateness, the vulgarity, the trivialization of the Holocaust, which is pretty disgusting. It shows how anti-American Marjorie Taylor Greene and her part of the Trumpist right is. They don't think that these are, think of the way they attack the military, people who serve the federal government, physicians at the CDC. They think these people, they think nothing of calling, as you say, of comparing these people to Nazis.
So, Abby, I want to play what Greene said after visiting the Holocaust Museum a few weeks ago, because she did apologize then.
The Holocaust there's nothing comparable to it. It happened, and over 6 million Jewish people were murdered. And there are words that I have said and remarks that I've made that I know are offensive, and for that I want to apologize.
That came after House Republican leader Kevin McCarthy had condemned her comments then. Abby, nothing from GOP leadership on the latest comments about brown shirts. I mean, will McCarthy take real action here, or does Greene ultimately know that she can pretty much say whatever she wants at this point, Abby?
Yeah, I do think that it's been clear for a long time that Marjorie Taylor Greene is setting the agenda in a lot of ways when it comes to Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy. He's been reluctant to push back on her, reluctant to do it privately and publicly. And the reason that she gave that apology, which I think now we can call what it is a stunt, it was because McCarthy was attempting at that time to try to pressure Democrats to pull the committee assignments of Congresswoman Ilhan Omar, and also trying to create this sort of scenario in which Greene apologized for her controversial comments while Congresswoman Omar did not. So I think the whole purpose of this was just a little bit of a political stunt, and Marjorie Taylor Greene, obviously, based on her comments then, knows better. She knows that the comparisons to the Holocaust are completely inappropriate and terrible, but she's doing it anyway because she also knows that there are no consequences when it comes to Republican leadership.
Mm. And Bill, you know, so it's Greene's latest comments about the Holocaust, but we're also learning about former President Trump's comments as well. According to an upcoming book by Wall Street Journal reporter Michael Bender, then President Trump allegedly praised Hitler during a discussion with his White House Chief of Staff, John Kelly. This was in 2018. Trump reportedly said, and I quote, "Hitler did a lot of good things." So Bill, of course, a Trump spokeswoman denies he said that. Who would admit to having said that? Can you just talk about that for a moment, that such a thing could have been said, and why you think those comments are different from Greene's Nazi comments?
Just one more word on Greene. I mean, she needs to apologize to the people who work at the CDC, the people who work in public health, the officials of the U.S. government, civilian employees, military employees, and of state governments, and of hospitals all over the country, et cetera, who are doing their best to help their fellow Americans. They're the ones she's insulted the most. It's not just that she's trivialized the memory of the Holocaust. The Holocaust, you know, it is what it is, and it will survive. The accurate history will survive the comments of Marjorie Taylor Greene. But she needs to apologize to her fellow Americans. In terms of Trump, I mean, you know, I think it does reveal something about him, which is he admires authoritarians. I'm not going to say he admires Hitler entirely. That would be maybe a little unfair. But he's praised the Chinese for Tiananmen Square. He criticized at the time Gorbachev for being too soft and not crushing dissent. He admires strongmen. And in that respect, he may not admire everything one hopes Hitler did, but he can't help but sort of have that say something nice about him. You know, John Kelly should step forward. I mean, this is reported by Michael Bender, a very reputable journalist, based on presumably information from Kelly. I think they were the only two in this conversation, right? Maybe not directly from Kelly, maybe from a third party to whom John Kelly reported this conversation. Trump's spokeswoman is now just flat out denying it. So who's telling the truth? I mean, John Kelly should confirm or not whether Trump said this.
Right. Well, of course, Trump's spokespeople have not earned anyone's credibility, but yes, John Kelly knows what happened, so he should say exactly what happened, what the context was, whether it's true or not. So, Abby, how do comments like Trump's, like Greene's, play with GOP voters?
I think the very fact that Greene is making the comments that she's making publicly and repeatedly tells you that she believes that this is popular in the Republican base. And I think that that's probably right. If you are online and you kind of are in the circles where, you know, conservatives, Trump conservatives are talking, they make these comparisons too. So it's not as if this is coming out of left field. This is something that has resonance in that part of the conservative movement, and that's why it's happening. That it's sad to say, but the truth is it has, I think, almost no negative effect when it comes to Trump's voters. If not, she's doing it because I think she thinks it'll help her.